Hello, everyone. A very good morning. Thank you, all of you, for joining today's session. I welcome you all for the second masterclass session this year. So, before we get started, I'd just like to take us through a few housekeeping rules. All right. So, by default, all attendees will be on listen only mode. And if you have any questions during this masterclass, please feel free to leave them on the Q&A panel. And we'll also have a live Q&A session right after the presentation where I should be able to answer any of the questions that you might have on the functionalities, right? And we will be recording this particular masterclass and we'll be sending you all the recordings as an email. So do bear with us, give us a couple of days, and you should be getting a recording of this meeting as well, right? And of course, if you have any feedback for us or if you have any questions on the topic we're about to address today, you can always write us an email to hello-pam360 at manageengine.com, and we should be able to take up those questions for you. All right. So the PAM Masterclass training series is an exclusive training series where we help all our customers to understand our product in depth and learn how you can use PAM to address your everyday use cases and challenges. My name is John, one of the technical consultants here at ManageEngine, and I will be the one presenting this masterclass on the essentials of privileged session management today. Okay. To get started, the exclusive masterclass series where we focus on one core module per episode. In today's session, we are going to look at security risks associated with privileged sessions and also the benefits of using a privileged session management solution such as this one. And we'll also address as to how best ManageEngine helps in this regard as well. So let's start with by looking at a few security risks involved with privileged sessions. So as you can see around this image, firstly, the remote connections have become an easy target, right, for all bad actors where they can easily log the credentials entered by the remote user or even intercept the traffic with man-in-the-middle attacks. Secondly, excessive privilege. That's a big issue that we're facing these days. So providing admin rights or even providing domain admin rights to users instead of just providing enough permissions for them to perform their activities. That's also something that we're looking to address with the PAM solution. Similarly, providing access to external users like vendors, contractors have also become a challenge in the recent times. Now, let's take a moment to look into the benefits of using a privileged session management tool. So firstly, a privileged session management tool allows all IT heads to have centralized control over all the critical infrastructure or systems located anywhere across the globe. And you can also provide granular access to any of your IT users and define the means by which they can gain access to your critical systems. You can also create a workflow mechanism to provision or deprovision access and have complete accountability for any kind of privileged access that's taking place within your environment. And also allows for third-party vendors or contractors to critical systems or specific applications without revealing sensitive credentials or opening up the entire network out to them. Okay, and it can also help meet organizations, various compliance standards such as SOX or HIPAA, ISO, PSI, DSS, and many as such. And all this in turn also leads to increased productivity and easy administration. Right. So privileged session management can be achieved through ManageEngine's various solutions. So we have a solution by the name Access Manager Plus, we have Password Manager Pro, as well as our comprehensive privileged access management suite, which is PAM 360. So these are some of the modules that are often offered within session management. So some of the controls that you see here on the left side, the basic controls can be availed through all of these products that I talked about earlier. So it can be available through Password Manager Pro, Access Manager Plus, as well as PAM 360. But some of the higher maturity controls on the right side can only be availed through PAM 360. All right, so we'll be having a look into each of the controls listed on this page here on today's session and see them in action. To get started with, from the basic controls, you will be able to provide one-click secure access to remote endpoints. So if you'd like to share access to any of your devices, might be things like your Windows servers, your Linux servers, your network devices, you can directly provision access through the PSM solution. So this way, vendors or contractors or even your internal IT users, without knowing any of the passwords, they should be able to launch one-click remote connections to those devices. You can also grant granular access to stakeholders and third parties. So there are multiple levels of sharing that can be done through PAM 360. So you can just provide just enough access for the vendors to be able to log in and perform any of the activities. And similarly, as administrators, you'll be able to collaborate along with those users. You can monitor what they're doing on those systems in real time. And of course, upon anything suspicious, you can terminate connections. You can even play back connections at a later time to review what exactly was performed within any particular login. Of course, there's going to be comprehensive real-time auditing of user activity. So every single activity carried out within the environment will be completely audited by the PAM solution. So as administrators, you can also review the audits, you can set up alerts, and be always, in the forefront of what's happening within the environment. You can also launch one-click web applications. So if you have any sort of applications which you'd like to grant access to any of the users or technicians, they can directly launch those websites from PAM 360. And we also have browser extensions using which users can launch one-click remote connections to those websites, as well as autofill and auto login credentials to the websites as well. So these are some of the basic controls, but for more high maturity or advanced controls are available for more mature organizations, like the ones you see on the right side. So we have bidirectional file transfer in case you want to allow files to be transferred between two different servers, and of course have audits of this transfer that can be done through PAN 360. We also have a landing server configuration that can be made. Suppose you're not able to provision access directly to a user to a particular server in the environment, you can have landing servers configured, in other words, jump servers, so that hops can be made in the background to establish this connection or provide access to the end user. So this particularly applies in cases where you have servers deployed within or behind firewalls or even DMZs. And we have application sandboxing and command control features. So in case of a Linux machine and you don't want to allow access to the entire device, just want to allow users to run certain commands within the session, we have command controls that can be implemented. Similarly, in a Windows scenario, if you don't want to allow access to the entire server, you just want users to be able to log in and have access to particular point applications on that device, we have application sandboxing. In other words, remote app that can be configured on the tool as well. Similarly, we do have a remote connect, which is a desktop the client available for Windows. So this way, if any of your power users or any of the administrators would like to have, direct remote connections made to any of the devices, and using native tools like MSTC or PuTTY for your SSH connections, now that can be done. That can be achieved with the thick client application. Similarly, we also have HTTPS gateway server functionality. This way, if you have any internal sites, any sensitive sites, or sites for your internal network device management, so things like this which are not publicly available or not available to regular users on the network, can be provisioned access through PAM 360 using the HTTPS gateway server feature. So we're going to look at each and every one of these controls in action. And for us to do that, I'm going to pull up my PAM instance here. And within this instance, I've currently logged in with an administrative user who's been assigned with a privileged administrator role, right? And here You can see I have already pre-configured some of the items, like I have added a few users into the solution. Particularly, I have a user called guest with a different role, if you notice. So we have a connection user role assigned to this user. So of course, for technicians and other end users, they don't need to be assigned with administrator roles on PAM 360. They can simply be assigned with the connection user role, which provides them with just enough access to be able to log in to PAM 360 and just have access to only the resources that has been shared with them or granted access to them, right? And similarly, within the resources tab, I also have some of my devices, assets onboarded here as well, which I will soon be sharing with the end user, and we can see how the provision of access can be done through PAM 360. To start with some of the basic controls, let us look into how we can provide a sharing or how we can share access to a particular point device within PAM 360. And for us to see that in action, I have another login here or another tab where I'm going to log in as the guest. And so this guest user just has a connection user role on PAM 360, does not have any administrative roles, thus only will have access to a limited set of tabs within the application, right? And similarly, the guest user currently does not have access to any of the resources or any of the credentials stored within the PAM solution yet. And this is because everything on PAM 360 works on an ownership sharing concept, wherein if you are an administrator, you'll be the one responsible for adding in all the devices and credentials, and then you will be responsible for sharing out with the required users as well. So in my case, if I want this guest user to have access to any particular credential or any particular device within the environment, I first have to share it with this person. So for me to do that, I'm going to go back to the admin login here. And from the admin login, sharing can be done at various levels. I can either do a resource level sharing, a group level sharing, or even an account level sharing, which is actually the most granular level of sharing you can do within the solution. So depending on the level, you can be doing the sharing. And for instance, in my case, I'm going to do an account level sharing where I'm going to share one specific account under a server with the user guest. So here we go. Let's say I want to share this administrator account. I'm just going to click on account actions here, share with users. And here I'm going to look for the user guest and then grant him access to that device. And of course, while granting access, there are multiple levels of permissions that you can provide. For instance, you can see some of the permissions available here. We have remote app only, which we will have a look into very soon. But apart from that, we have view password as well as modify password permissions. So if you simply want a user to be able to log into a particular device that has been shared with the user, you simply need to provide them with the view password permissions. But of course, if you would like the user to perform any password modifications, you can provide them with the modify password permission. Of course, we always aim to provide the least privilege. So let's go with the view passwords here and then grant access to the user guest. And if I return back to the guest user login now, the guest user should now be able to see that one particular server that I've shared with him, this EC2 server, which is a Windows machine. And under that device, only that particular account, the administrator account that I shared, is going to be visible and nothing else. So from here, if the user would like to open a remote connection, all the user has to do is just click on this open connection button and directly launch a one-click remote connection. Just like that, and with one click, without having any awareness to the password, the user will be able to log in to that particular device and perform any operation on it. Right, so this is a basic level of access that you can provide to a user, but of course, there's no controls involved here. But within the session, if you'd like the user to perform any kind of file transfers, we have a provision available as well. So using this folder icon that's going to pop up within the screen, the user can perform bidirectional file transfers where they can transfer files from the local machine to that target server as well as the other way. So they can also move files from the server to the local machine as well. So the file transfer can be done within the RDP connection. And apart from this, if you want to restrict activities on this connection, or if you want to only allow access for a limited period of time, that is just in time access, then what you can do is you can also leverage our access control workflow to have that done. So with the access control workflow enabled, the guest user will only have access to that particular server for a specified period of time, after which the user will automatically lose access. Now let's see how that is configured as well. So I'll go back to the admin login, and from the admin login, I'm going to configure this access control workflow for this very same account that was shared earlier with the user guest. So I'm going to click on account actions here, configure access control. And of course, as part of the access control workflow configuration, there are tons of settings that you can toggle or play around with. So things like selecting your approval administrators, excluding users from this list, or even some interesting functionalities will be seen under the miscellaneous settings here. So if you'd like to enforce multiple admin approvals, that is, if you need more than one admin to approve a request before the technician is granted access, you can do that. And similarly, you can also force users to provide a reason for every password retrieval. And another interesting functionality is to reset passwords after exclusive use. So suppose you're sharing a credential with a technician, right? And the technician can use that credential for the next 30 minutes. So if you want that password for that account to be automatically rotated after that period of access, you can very well enable this checkbox here. So PAM 360 will go ahead, revoke access after 30 minutes, and then perform a password reset on that account as well. Now, let's see this in action. Let me activate the workflow. Once activated, now if I go back to the end user login, that is the guest user login, the guest user should now be getting a request button. And before making a request, even if the guest user tries to open a connection, the PAM solution is not going to allow that. It's going to say that this requires an approval. So firstly, the end user will have to make a request and also provide a valid reason as to why they need access to that server. So I can say something like testing as a reason, and then send this request through. And right now, your approval administrators will be getting a notification both on the PAM web console as well as an email notification, which will highlight that there is a password request that's pending from a user. So I can witness that from here. So this is my admin login. And within the password request, I should be able to see this request. So it's from the user guest, and guest needs access to this particular server. And the reason is to perform some testing. If I feel like that's a valid reason, I can go ahead and approve the request for the user. If not, I can go ahead and reject the request as well. So once the request has been approved, it should allow the end user to log into that particular device and have access to it only for a defined period of time. So from this point, the user can easily go ahead and check out that credential and then have remote access, which should be valid for the next 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, I expect the session to be automatically terminated by PAM 360. Okay. And similarly, as administrators, as solution administrators, you'll be getting a complete overview of what's happening within the environment. So if I go back to the admin login here and into the audit section, I should get a comprehensive overview of every single activity taking place within this tool. So you can see some of the activities here, such as passwords being requested by guest, the request being approved by admin, and then the guest user launching a remote connection to the server from this IP address. So every single activity will be caught as an audit within the solution. And apart from these audits, we're also going to have real-time monitoring. So if I go to the active sessions tab here, this should give me a list of all the active sessions present within my environment. So if somebody has an active RDP connection or an active SSH connection, it'll all be listed under the single tab. So from here, the administrators should be able to join the session in parallel and monitor any suspicious activities. So here we go. I can just click on the join button, which allows me to see what the guest user is currently doing on that RDP connection. And if I happen to see the guest user doing something suspicious within that login, I also have an option where I can terminate that particular user's login and basically kick him out of that session with just one click of a button. And just like that, I should be able to regain access over my server. And apart from these, real-time monitoring functionalities and auditing, we also have session recordings available. So this means at any later point of time, if you'd like to play back a session to review any user's activities, you can always do that. So PAM 360 should be able to give you a video playback of the entire instance, and hopingly, by watching the video, you should be able to have answers to any of your forensic questions as well. And we saw how you could launch RDP connections, or we can even launch SSH connections through this tool. But apart from that, what if you have any web-based applications, right? If you have any websites that you'd like to vault within PAM 360 and share with your users. Now, PAM 360 also allows you to launch one-click remote connections to your web-based applications as well. So I can just click on the remote connection, which will allow me to launch the remote connection directly to that website. So it will basically launch the website on a separate tab for me. And apart from this, we also have a browser extension which you can install for PAM 360. The browser extension is available on Chrome, Edge, and Firefox. So using the browser extension, you will be able to launch connections to websites. And not just that, we can also autofill credentials for your web-based applications. And we can also auto login users with just one click of a button as well. So similar to how we launched RDP connections, you can just share a password with the user, and through the browser extension, the user can just directly click on the extension and launch a one-click remote connection to that website and be automatically logged into that website without having to know the password in the first place. So these are some of the basic controls that can be achieved in terms of session management. But apart from this, we also have certain high maturity advanced controls for more matured PAM environments. So things like landing servers can also be configured on PAM 360. So typically how connections work with PAM 360 is that if a user happens to launch a remote connection, the connections are all tunneled through the PAM server to the target system. So PAM server in this case is going to act as a proxy and gateway all these connections to the target device. But this might not always be possible in all the scenarios, right? There might be cases where you cannot directly launch connections from the PAM server to the target device. Maybe because that target device is lying beyond a firewall, or it's lying within a DMZ. And you might mostly note the scenario in a data center kind of an environment where they'll not be able to open up the entire environment out to you. Instead, they'll have one jump server configured in the data center. So every time you want to log into one of your machines, you have to make the connection via the jump server. Now, PAM 360 is able to simplify this process for you as well with our landing server configuration. So within the admin tab, you should find this option. So with the landing server configuration, what you can do is you can pre-configure all the hops to be made by PAM 360. So if you're not able to directly open a connection from the PAM server to a target server, you can have an intermediary server, a landing server that is configured in between the PAM server and the target device. This way, every time a user tries to launch a remote connection, PAM 360 will first establish that connection to the landing server, and from there, a subsequent connection will be made to the target device. Okay, and to configure this process is very straightforward. The very first thing that you need to do is the landing server also needs to be added as a resource under PAM 360. Once that is done, you can just click on this add landing server option here, and you can add up all the landing servers on this particular page. So here you can set up a primary landing server and also assign an account using which the PAM 360 tool is going to log into that particular landing server. You can even have a secondary hop made as well. In case you want to jump from a primary server to a secondary server before making a connection to the target system, you can add a secondary hop as well on this page. Once all the hops have been added, you can just go ahead and now associate this particular landing server configuration to your desired target machine. So you just need to select a target machine from this page and click on the associate connections button. Once that is done, your configuration is pretty much complete. So every time a user now tries to launch a remote connection to this machine called EC2 AMAS, firstly, PAM 360 will make a hop to this particular machine, which is configured to be the landing server. And from this machine, a subsequent connection will be launched to that target device. Okay, so here we go. We can see this in action. So if I go into the resources tab, for the end user, this is going to look like a seamless experience. It's going to be very transparent. The end user simply has to select the target device and click on the open connection button. Once done, PAM 360 will make all these hops in the background. So the user will not see any of these hops happening. He'll just see a brief terminal pop up for a second there, and then he'll be directly logged into that target device. But of course, as administrators, you can track all these actions right from the audit tab. So within the audits, you should be able to see the hops being made by PAM 360 in the background. So you can see there was a connection first made to this particular machine, which is configured to be the landing server. And then a subsequent connection was made to this target device that you're trying to connect to. So this opens up your connection from the PAM to any of your servers within DMZ or within firewall or behind firewall devices. And apart from this, if you'd like to sort of control access to these devices, that is within the devices, instead of providing access to the entire server that is being shared to a technician, if you only want the technician to have access to specific point applications on a server, now we also have a remote app feature which caters to just that. So of course, in most scenarios, we have a technician come in to perform, like an external user or vendor come in to perform certain activities in the environment. Rarely would you need to provide them with access to the entire server, but rather they only would have to work on certain particular applications that are already installed on that machine. So for this, you can make use of the remote app functionality, which is actually a native feature that is offered by Microsoft. So once a remote app or any installed application is published on a target server, those published applications can actually be discovered from PAM 360. You can just either add them manually or you can click on the discovery button, which will automatically discover any of the published applications from a target device, and it will list them here. So once all the applications have been discovered into the solution, now you can associate them with the required resources. So in my case, I have an application here, which is Google Chrome. So what I can do is I can just associate this to one of my servers, like this one, for instance, this EC2 MS device. So once I've associated this particular application to that device, now I can share this particular application with my end user. And how I can do that is within the share with users option, you need to select the appropriate permission that you're going to provide to that user. So once I click on share with users, you can see I've provided this user. I've not provided any user with any access as of yet. But if I want one of my users to have access to one particular point application that is configured on that server, then I need to simply provide them with the remote app only permission. If you recall earlier, we provided the guest user with a view password permission on one of the other servers, which allow the user to have access to the entire desktop. But in this case, we're going to provide just with remote app permissions on the server. And we're also going to select the particular applications to which this guest user should have access to. So in my case, I'm just going to select this Google Chrome application and then share access to that particular user. Now, if I go back to the guest user login, guest user should also be able to see that particular application that I've shared with them, this particular server. And if the user clicks on this open connection button against this particular application, you can see that he can no longer open a direct RDP connection or a Windows remote desktop connection, but rather he's only limited to that particular point application that I've shared with him. So from here, the user can just click on that application. Once after this, PAM 360 will launch a connection to that particular server where the application is installed and only allow this guest user access to that particular Google Chrome application that I've shared with that user, nothing else. So the guest user in this case, he cannot navigate to the desktop, he cannot explore the File Explorer or perform any other activity on the server apart from accessing this particular point application that has been shared with him. So this is how you can limit access to particular point applications on the servers when you're granting access. And this is how you can do it for installed applications. But what about your internal web-based applications or any browser-based applications? Of course, you might be having certain internal sensitive applications, maybe applications to reach your router configuration page or firewall configuration page. Now, these applications can also be proxied through the PAM server using our HTTPS gateway feature. So once again, you'll find this configuration available under the admin tab. So here, once the HTTPS gateway server is enabled with this toggle, every website that is launched through PAM 360 will be tunneled or proxied on this particular port, the A2A2 port on the PAM server. Now let's see this in action. I've activated my gateway server act automatically. And now I'm going to return back to my resources tab. And from the resources tab, I already have a web-based application added here. And to add a web-based application, you simply need to select the appropriate resource type. When you're adding a resource manually, you need to select the resource type to be website accounts. So this allows you to add the URL required for that particular website as well on the resource URL field. Once the web application has been added, now for a user to launch a remote connection, they can just click on that remote connection button available here and click on the Open HTTPS Gateway Connection button. Before doing this, I would like to show you the website that I've configured here. So if I click on Edit Resource, you should be able to see this particular website. So this particular website is basically an internal application that is running on the port 8443. So if I click on the remote connection button here and launch a HTTPS gateway based connection, now PAM 360 will be able to proxy this connection for me through the PAM server and establish this connection on my browser window. And if you observe here on the URL, this particular application is currently being launched from the 8285 port, which is configured to be the gateway port on the PAM instance. So this way, we're able to access this particular application, which is an internal application, proxy through the PAM server itself, rather than actually launching it from the user's laptops or desktops. This is how we can basically limit connections to your installed applications, your web-based applications. But what about your Linux devices, right? You might have critical Linux devices present within the environment. And if you'd like to sort of restrict access to particular commands that can be executed within the Linux instance, now that can also very well be done using our SSH command control feature. Once again, you will find the same under the admin tab. So if you search for SSH command control, you should be able to define all the commands the user is allowed to execute on a particular session within this window. You can even create different command sets. So if you have different teams present within the organization, and if you want each team to be able to execute their own set of commands within the SSH connection, now those can be configured as different command sets. So I have a few predefined command sets listed here. I have a few command sets for network administration, some system administration listed here. So now I can go ahead and associate each of these command sets with my device. So I have a Linux machine here. I'm going to click on resource actions and configure SSH command control. And of course, on this particular page, I need to associate the required command sets to be allowed to execute on this machine. So in this case, I'm just going to provide this particular server with, or this particular user with basic administration commands to be run on that server. And once I associate this, if I tend to open an SSH connection to this Linux machine now, the user will no longer be able to make any free inputs within the session. The user cannot type in any of the commands, but rather the user will only be limited to execute the commands that are listed here, that are associated by the administrator to this particular server, where the user can just click on this execute button. Once after clicking on the button, that particular command will be executed on the terminal session. So this way, if you only want to allow certain users to allow only particular commands to be run on a server, this can be done. So this prevents them from running any dangerous commands like rm to delete any files within the server. So any of those possibilities can be completely removed with the whitelisting of SSH commands. And apart from this, we also have a thick client that is available for PAM 360. So the thick client is a native, or it's not a native, but it is a Windows only application at the moment. So through which, if you'd like to provide access to any of your power users, right? If you have any administrators or any power users within the environment, and if you'd like them to establish direct connections, direct RDP connections or SSH connections using native tools like MSTC or PuTTY, now that can be achieved with the thick client application, right? So with the thick client, instead of having your users install multiple applications on their devices like PuTTY and MSTC, we bundle those applications into one single client. So you can simply install this application on your particular end device and then launch it. Once you launch it, the interface is going to look very similar to your PAM web instance. And on this instance, I'm going to log in with this guest credentials. And you also need to make your server configurations within the remote connect application as well. So you need to provide your server name as well as the port on which your PAM instance is currently running. Once you do that, you should be able to connect your PAM instance from here. And as you can see on this particular application, you don't have any additional functionalities apart from just the ability to be able to launch remote connections. All right. So from here, similarly, how you launch connections from the web browser, the same can be launched from here. The only difference is that these connections are going to be made natively using the MSTC connection that is for Windows. And in case of a Linux device, we're going to use PuTTY to launch these connections for you. Okay. And apart from this, we also have a file transfer functionality within PAM 360 as well. So if you're looking to transfer files between two different servers present within the environment, now the secure file transfer can also be done natively through PAM 360 with the secure file transfer option, where you can select your servers. If you want to transfer files from server A to server B, you can select them on the respective page here. This way, you can transfer files to and fro between the servers. So here, for instance, I'm going to pick one of my devices like this Linux VM. I'm going to select one of my accounts and connect using this account. All right, so SFTP is currently not allowed when command control is enabled, right? Of course, that is to prevent any sort of, additional access to be provided from the user. So what I'm going to do is firstly, I'm going to remove the command control that is configured. So I'm going to dissociate the commands. Once done, now I should be allowed to perform the file transfer. So within this window, once again, I'm going to select my Linux machine. And once I click on connect, as you can see, all the files that are part of that Linux machine will be listed here. And this is cross-platform compatible. So in case you want to transfer files from a Linux machine to a Windows server or from a Windows server to a Linux machine, it will both be possible, right? As long as SFTP is enabled on either of those machines. All right. So now let's have a quick recap into all the functionalities that we have seen so far on this masterclass. So firstly, we saw how remote apps or how remote connections can be launched from the PAM 360 application. So if you want to provide access to any of your vendors or any of your IT technicians, you don't have to provide or you don't have to reveal the passwords with any of the users. Simply provide the sharing from PAM 360. This way, the technician can easily log in and then just establish a one-click remote connection to that target device without having to know the passwords. And similarly, any of these activities that are performed within those sessions will be completely audited and recorded as well. This way, administrators at any point of time, they can always review the audits to perform any activity performed within the session or within the environment, and also have video playbacks of the same. So this way, at a later point of time, if they want to play back a video recording to review any of the activities for audit purposes, they can do that. And similarly, we configured landing servers, that is to act as jump servers in case of servers that are present within DMZs or behind firewalls or within data centers, you can launch gateway-based connections that is first made to the landing server, and from the landing server, a subsequent connection is made to the target device. And we also saw how we can perform bidirectional file transfers both within the session and also between two different servers present within your environment as well. And finally, we saw how you can launch one-click remote connections with our thick client, which bundles the native MSTSC as well as the PuTTY clients within. So without the need for having any additional applications to be installed on the user's machine, with this one single application, they should be able to launch both the connections natively, that is directly from their laptops to the target system. Okay. And with this set team, we have covered most of the session management functionalities with PAM 360. So from here, we'll be moving on to the next part of the session, which is the live Q&A. All right. And before we go on to the live Q&A, I'm also going to quickly drop a couple of links for you on the chat. And I would really appreciate if you could just take a couple of minutes of your time to just leave a review for us on a Gartner peer insights for PAM 360 and PMP. So your feedback will not only help us at ManageEngine grow, but also assist potential customers to make informed decisions. And I also would like to thank all of you for being part of this journey, right? So I'm just going to drop the links for you really quick on the chat, right? And on to the question and answers. So if you have any questions for us, participants, if you have any questions for any of the functionalities that we've seen so far, just drop it on the Q&A section, and I should be able to take up those questions now. So I do see that we have a few questions already on the Q&A panel, so I'll be addressing them now. Right. So the first question is, all the auditing can be set up to send alerts through email as well. Yes. So you can set up email alerts for any of the audits that are taking place within PAM 360. So I'll show them to you now. So within the audit section, if you go to audit actions, you will have a way in which you can enable email notifications for any of the auditable actions within PAM 360. So things like sessions being launched, passwords being retrieved, accounts being shared with users, any of these auditable activity within PAM 360 can be triggered as email alerts as well to keep your administrators notified on any of the actions. All right. And the second question would be, can the PAM server be set up for external access? Yes, you can do that. As you know, PAM 360 is a self-hosted offering as of now. So what you can do is you can simply publish two of the ports on the PAM server externally, and you can also provide a public IP address for the PAM server. And the only ports that need to be published would be the A2A2 port. And this is for the web client access. And you also would have to publish the A3A3 port. And this is for the gateway connections to take place from. So just these two ports need to be exposed out on the internet. And using this, any of your external users should be able to access the PAM interface and then open remote connections from here. And do keep in mind that any of the connections launched from PAM 360 are tunneled through the PAM server. So this means the users will simply be making a HTTPS based connection to the PAM interface. And from the PAM server is where the RDP or the SSH connections will be made to the target systems. Okay. And the third question, we have outsourced contractors that need to have access to jump boxes within PAM. How can we give them access? So again, the answer to this is the same answer to the previous question. So if you'd like to grant access to any of your vendors or contractors, you have to open up these couple ports on the PAM server and also assign a public IP address, or you can even provide site-to-site VPN access just to the PAM server out to your vendors and contractors. You don't need to open your entire environment out to the vendors or contractors. They simply need to be able to access the PAM server, and from there they should be able to launch those remote connections. Okay. And the fourth question is, I am a PAM 360 user, very new. I've been trying to use PAM 360 for passwordless logins with my help text. All right, so that my users don't have to give them their passwords to set up local profiles. I've been struggling and wondering for some help. Of course, PAM 360 can very well help in this regard. So if you'd like your help desk technicians to be able to log into your end user machines, right, and set up, do some configurations on the end devices, you can very well do that with PAM 360 as well. This tool is not just limited to your servers, but you can also use this for your endpoint device management as well. So it's going to work in a similar concept. We can do an account discovery in the environment. This way, any of the member machines present in your environment will be automatically discovered into PAM 360 along with the local accounts that are present under them. So from that point, your PAM administrators can reset deposit on those local accounts and use those accounts to launch RDP connections to the end user machines. And from there, they should be able to perform any of the configurations on those devices. And of course, if you need any assistance with this, just write to our support team, just write us an email, and we can even organize a session with you and help you out with that initial configuration so that you have a easy sort of a migration into using the spam solution in the environment. Okay. And the last question is, how can I make JIT to work correctly? So JIT, again, we have two parts to JIT with PAM 360. We have just-in-time access, and we also have just-in-time privilege elevation. Okay, so just-in-time access can be configured through our access control workflow that we saw earlier. So instead of just sharing a server with a user, you're also going to configure an access control workflow on it. This way, the user will only be able to have access to the server once the request has been approved by an administrator. And even after approval, the user will only be able to have access to a server for a specific period of time, after which the user will automatically lose access. And how you configure the workflow is from here. So you can just click on account actions, configure access control, and you should be able to define the time period of access here. And in case you'd like to reset passwords after every use, you can configure that. So once this workflow is configured, every time now a user tries to open a connection to a particular server, they'll be first forced to make a request. Okay, so this request will be going out to all your administrators, and once one of the administrators happen to approve a request, the technician will be allowed access, right? And if you've set only 30 minutes of access, then after 30 minutes, the session will be automatically terminated for that user. Okay, and if you're looking to have more knowledge on just-in-time privilege elevation, we will have a dedicated session for that with privilege elevation delegation management, and do make sure to join that session as well to learn more about just-in-time privilege elevation. And yes, to answer the last question, will I get the recording of today's masterclass? Yes, you'll be receiving an email from us in a couple of days with the recording to the session. So you can review that. And of course, if you have any further questions come up, you can always drop us an email and we should be happy to assist you from there. Okay, I think that's all the questions for today. And I know that we're also running a little bit beyond schedule. So I think with this, we have reached today's webinar. And I hope the session was useful in learning more about privilege session management. So we hope to see you in our next masterclass episodes as well. And always, as said, please feel free to reach out via email if you have any doubts or if you have any of your queries answered, right? And once again, I want to thank you all for your time to attend the session today. And we hope to see you all in the next masterclass and all our upcoming masterclass sessions as well. Until then, this is John signing off. Thank you once again. Have a great day ahead. Bye for now.